This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Every year, a new crop of free agents and draft picks comes in and kind of pushes aside a chunk of the roster that you had expectations about. For example, Anthony Schwartz. There was a point in time where people had a lot of hopes for Anthony Schwartz, but then we drafted more guys, signed more guys, and by the time we got Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman, we were ready to go like that. Right, like we were ready to push it to the side. So today we're going to talk about some Browns that I feel like are getting forgotten about kind of in this cycle with the draft, with free agency, that are primed to still contribute to the team in a meaningful way, or at least have a chance to contribute to the team in a meaningful way. And the first guy I'm going to bring up is Elijah Moore. And look, I hate this thing that we do when it comes to football discourse, where when we recognize a player either underperformed or did not live up to expectations, we tend to then take that as justification for acting like that player is the worst football player ever to live. Right. And most of the time, this happens to players that the fan base hypes up. And then when that player doesn't live up to that hype, people turn on him. And I think Elijah Moore is a great case of that. I think people were getting a little crazy in the offseason. They were comparing him to Deebo Samuel and saying he's going to be the Browns' Deebo Samuel. If you watch me and you watch my channel at that time, I always felt like that was a little ridiculous. I set the expectations for Elijah Moore at about 600 to 800 yards, and he was within that level of expectation. I think that's going to be the level of expectation for him again. I think there was this thought that the Browns were going to bring in Elijah Moore to be a world beater, or at least this hope that the Browns were going to bring in Elijah Moore and he was going to have a breakout year. And I think there was mass disagreement on what a breakout year for Elijah Moore is. Now, I don't think this year is a breakout year for him, right? A breakout year to me for Elijah Moore would have been about 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, right? If he would have hit those numbers, then I think it would have qualified as a breakout year. This was a year where he got more targets, 100 targets. I mean, he got more production. I thought he came on well at the end of the year, but I also think he kind of struggled with his fit in this offense early in the season, especially during that period of time when PJ Walker and DTR were rotating the starting duties before Deshaun Watson came back for that second time. I expect 2024 to be a smoother ride. I expect him to be a good bit more efficient in 2024. And I think a lot of people are really low on Elijah Moore. I've heard people say that the Browns should cut him, which I think is ridiculous. But I do think that Elijah Moore has a lot to offer this team. I just think people needed to get their expectations kind of recalibrated to a place that makes sense, because where we were when the Browns made that trade was a little bit too much, right? I think the Deebo Samuel comparisons were a little wild, especially like when we compare somebody to Deebo, we're not comparing them to like the last 2 seasons where he's had less than 800 yards receiving. We're comparing him to that 1,400 yard Deebo season he had in 2021, and that's just kind of not really realistic for Elijah Moore. Another player that I feel like has gotten forgotten about, Jordan Atkins. He did not have a good year last year. Now, he was brought in to be somebody that was going to be used with Deshaun Watson, and obviously Deshaun Watson did not play that many games, so his usefulness was obviously hurt by not having Deshaun Watson. I do think in a new offense, I do think in an offense that's going to prioritize David Njoku more, they're going to be able to play off that attention that David Njoku gets and get Jordan Atkins some more targets. I think he's going to get around 300 to 400 yards. I think that's work for a backup tight end. And I think he's going to be somebody who we've forgotten about that might be in a position to kind of step up and surprise us. Another guy that's been forgotten about is Jerome Ford, and he's another victim of people hyping him up. He doesn't live up to that hype. So we just throw out all of the production that he had, like to the point where people are telling me that Jerome Ford might not make the team, which I find to be ridiculous. Jerome Ford had 9 touchdowns for this team, 5 receiving touchdowns. He proved himself to be a really legitimately good receiving back. I do think that he's limited as a feature back. I think his style kind of gets exploited more easily when he's asked to be a feature back, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have any use for the Cleveland Browns. I think he has a ton of use for the Cleveland Browns, and I think as a third down running back, he has that. He's a good pass protector. He's an active and willing pass protector. I think once he adds more weight to his frame, he'll be a pretty damn good pass protector, and he's a good receiving back, and he's somebody who has breakaway speed to get big runs. Now, is he somebody you want to run the ball on first and second down? No. Was he put in that position last year? Yes, and he did not do well. But sometimes players need to be put in the right position to be able to succeed. And I don't think the role that he had at running back last year after Nick Chubb went down was a role that really fit him at where he was at that time. Now, maybe a Jerome Ford is able to maintain his speed and quickness while also adding about 20 pounds of muscle to his frame. Maybe by then he'll be ready to go and be one of those 4 3-down backs, but right now he's a third down back, and he's a damn good third down back. A lot of production, over 1,000 yards of production, 9 touchdowns. If he wasn't living in the shadow of Nick Chubb, I think we would be able to appreciate those numbers a little bit more. And I'm not saying he did a great job, but to act like there's not a role for him because we signed Donta Foreman and Nyheim Hines is kind of ridiculous. Like, he put up some good numbers last year, and I don't think that's going to be forgotten about by Andrew Berry or Kevin Stefanski anytime soon. Obo Okoronkwo and Alex Wright. Look, the Browns ran it back at the edge position, which means they brought back Zadarius Smith, which means these guys are going to be more in a supporting role. But I think we're underestimating how big of an upgrade we just got in our supporting role by having it be Obo Okoronkwo and Alex Wright. That's a pretty damn good backup situation that the Cleveland Browns have at the edge position. You can even factor in like an Isaiah McGuire into that, right? Hopefully in year 2, he's ready to produce a little bit more, just like Alex Wright. Thought Alex Wright put together good numbers to make an argument that he could be the opposite edge if the Browns wanted to go in that direction. And then you have Zadarius Smith in there. I think for the first time in a while, you got a real full rotation at that edge position where we're not going to notice as much when one of the big dogs or one of the starters at edge have to get off the field to get their rest. So I think that's going to be a big contribution when it comes to being able to sustain good defensive outings. It comes from your ability to keep fresh edge defenders on the field, because we know edge, they get tired quickly. You got to rotate these guys in and out. And if a team just has to wait until Myles Garrett gets tired and gets off the field to be able to do whatever they want to you, then they're always going to be able to do whatever they want to you. So you need quality backups to make sure that the level doesn't go too drastically far to where you could just be taken advantage of. We saw what happened in 2022 with Joe Woods when they had only Myles Garrett. Whenever Myles Garrett went off the field, it was an absolute disaster. So having that depth, having that level of play at the backup edge positions, and then having some pieces to play with behind them, I think is a really good thing for the Cleveland Browns. Next guy I'm going to talk about is Juan Thornhill, who I did not think had the greatest of first years. I don't think it was bad. I just think it was pretty league average his first year as a Cleveland Brown. Now, I'm willing to give safeties and anybody who's going to have to play kind of those back end roles in a new defense a little bit more time than I would be inclined to give like a defensive tackle or a defensive end. right? Because those positions are pretty universal no matter what defense you are in. But safety, it's a little different, right? He's not only going to a new team, he's going to a new defense. I think another year being comfortable. And I think that's what you're going to see in that second year of Jim Schwartz is the comfort in the secondary be a little better. The Browns were an excellent man coverage team, but they struggled in the secondary when they were asked to do zone coverage. I think that is where you saw the holes of the Cleveland Browns being a first year coach. I mean, not first year coach, but under a new defense in the first year of it, kind of bite them in the ass is when they had to play zone or when they had to get in these more coverage heavy defensive looks. And I think Juan Thornhill, once he gets more and more comfortable in this defense, more and more comfortable in his role here in Cleveland, I think he's going to be somebody who's going to be able to provide at a higher level. On that same vein, I got Greg Newsome, who is in his third year of getting comfortable to this new kind of hybrid nickel / outside corner position that he plays. I think just another year in the league is going to make him better. And I think the improvement for the defense this year is really going to be in the secondary, because I think that defensive line with Myles Garrett, Za'Darius Smith, they're going to look as good as they looked last year, this year, more than likely, if everything goes to plan. But where you should expect some improvement, I think, is in that secondary with guys like Greg Newsome, with guys like Juan Thornhill, and with guys like Grant Delpit. It's something that's being forgotten about because we're focusing on all the new shiny pieces. But when you talk about a defense in its second year with a new defensive coordinator, the secondary is usually what improves after that. And you talk about a team that had issues with those end arounds, with the motion. That's just something that continuity across your defense will help you with. This is my final note, and I don't know if I said this on sportsforcleveland.com or exactly where I got this one off, but I want to make sure I get this one off here. It's funny to me that since there is an opportunity to get new players, we tend to really overvalue what it means when you bring in these big names, right? You even see it in college football now, when it didn't used to always be the case, but you see this in the NFL all the time where a team brings in a bunch of new names and everybody gets infatuated with that. And if you're not a team that brought in a bunch of new names, people say stuff like, you just stood pat. You didn't get better, right? That's a common take for teams that don't add a bunch of talent in free agency. And the same can be true for college football now with the transfer portal and NIL. But there used to be a thing that people would say. And that thing that people would say is, hey, this team has a lot of returning starters. This team has a lot of continuity. And it's funny to me that now people view continuity and returning a bunch of your starters as a neutral to a negative thing. But everything about football tells us that returning a bunch of starters and having continuity on a unit is almost always a good thing as long as that unit has been proven to be productive. Great units are rarely put together in free agency and have their peak year the year after they're put together in free agency. It usually takes 2-3 years for these defenses to gel to a point to where they're ready to play some of the most dominant football you've ever seen. So I know some people are down because the Browns didn't get this big name here or that big name. But what they did do, I think, is also as important as getting one of those big names. They got a lot of continuity. They brought back remember we used to say this about team, they got a lot of returning seniors. They're going to be really good. That's what this Browns defense is. They got a lot of returning seniors on this team. They got a lot of continuity on this team. They got a lot of starters returning, really good, high quality starters returning. And in my book, that continuity with this level of talent is better than just signing a big name in free agency to get everybody excited for a couple weeks. We've been there, done that. But that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.